Episode 3, Shenandoah Park Murders. Hey y'all, I'm Heather and this is Poisoned Appalachia, the dark side of Appalachia. Once again, thanks for listening. I'm still shocked by all the support I've had with starting this podcast up. I hope you all enjoyed the first two. I know the sound's not the greatest on these. I'm just recording them on my iPhone. Hopefully when I get a little more funds, I'll be able to get a better microphone, but so this one I might sound a little tin candy in all these, but it's just because I'm using my Apple or my iPhone for that. So I just want to let you guys know. So this one here is going to be a lot rougher than the last two because this one's real life. It actually happened, and the monster is way worse than any cryptid or curse. So I actually remember seeing this story many years ago, like on Dateline or 48 Hours, or maybe some ID show, something like that. It was unsolved, but when I looked up the story, it's been solved, and man, it's a crazy story and a long journey to the actual killer. So this is the Shenandoah Park murders. On May 19th, 1996, Julie Williams and Lollie Winans went on a backpacking trip to Shenandoah National Park with their golden retriever Taj. They were due back by May 28th. Williams was reported missing on May 31st after her roommate phoned Williams' father to inform him that she hadn't returned from her trip. But first, let's take a little look at Lollie and Julie and see who they were. Laura Winans, also known as Lollie, was 26 years old and from Unity, Maine. She had a strong love of nature and the outdoors. She was studying to become a certified guide, and she was to share her love of nature and the outdoors with others. Her family was wealthy. I read somewhere that she came from like a brewing family. They owned a brewery or something. She grew up like with a lot of the finer things in life. But despite this, she stayed really down to earth and didn't really fit into the upper class life. She just had like a really great energy and could really lift up others when they were feeling down. And she had a great sense of humor, and her friends were the most important things to her. She attended college in Sterling, Vermont. It was an unconventional college. The website for Sterling says it is a 100% environmentally focused college in Vermont. Nestled in a rural Vermont village, Sterling offers 2-year and 4-year undergraduate degrees in environmental sciences. We provide a liberal arts education that uses the local farms, forests, rivers, and wetlands as our classrooms. With a small student body of fewer than 100 students in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, we foster a tight-knit community that prides itself on sustainable and socially responsible living. At Sterling, we give you the opportunity to roll your sleeves up and learn a very hands-on, experiential way to prepare you for the challenges of the status quo. Sterling, where small is better. So that actually sounds like something that I totally would have loved. I mean, honestly, doesn't that sound like a great place to go? Unfortunately, Lollie had been sexually abused when she was a child, and it really affected her. While at Sterling, it really began to take a toll on her, and she began to abuse alcohol, and she eventually dropped out of college. She finally started therapy to work through her problems, and she realized she was not a good fit for Vermont. So she moved to Unity College in Maine, which was a college very similar to Sterling. It focused on the environment, just about the same. At Unity, she decided to train to become a wilderness guide. Her end goal was to eventually run a retreat for sexually abused women. She saw nature as healing and just wanted to share with the rest of the world. Lollie, while at Unity, joined Woodswomen as an intern for the summer. Woodswomen Incorporated was a nonprofit organization focusing on education and adventure travel operated by women for women out of Minneapolis, Minnesota from 1977 to 1999. Woodswomen was one of the first adventure travel companies serving exclusively women and served more than 8,000 women and 1,200 children in its tenure. It was one of the very first women's outdoor adventure groups. Lollie was a canoe guide for that summer. This is where she and Julie met. They just hit it off right away. They shared a tent with another woman, and they would spend their nights up all night talking and laughing. You know how you do when you're just like clicking in a relationship. They realized that they had more than a friendship, but a bond, so they soon were in a relationship. Julie was 24 years old and from St. Cloud, Minnesota. She loved nature. She studied geology in college, and she hoped to try to get everyone to love the outdoors as much as she did. Julie had been raised as a Christian and just really struggled with her relationship and coming to terms with who she was. After starting college, she really began to question her sexuality. Julie was very driven and often considered a go-getter. Before graduating from high school, she was a volunteer at women's shelters. Then in 1993, she went to Greek Macedonia and studied there, and went to Italy, and she loved it so much. She just wanted to soak in the world. After graduating college, she wanted to move away from her home and really discover herself. She moved to Richmond, Vermont, and worked in a bookstore. While there, she truly found herself. She even started a group with local lesbians called Church Ladies, which, I'm not going to lie, immediately makes me think of Dana Carvey. But that's probably just me. But this group was to kind of find a way to make her religion and her life work together. She didn't want to give up on her love of God, as she was very religious, but she also didn't want to give up on those she loved. And she did come to terms with it all and balanced it both. One summer, she went to the woodsman camp, which brought her to Lollie. Both told their close friends, but neither told their parents. They weren't ready to discuss it yet with them. They dated quietly, traveling back and forth on weekends, but soon they prepared to move in together in Huntington, Vermont. Julie was going to start a new job, so to celebrate, they wanted to take a backpacking trip. So they headed to the Shenandoah National Park. Shenandoah is in, guess where? Appalachia. That's right. Virginia, to be specific, which is why it fits in this podcast. Shenandoah Park is part of the Blue Ridge Mountains in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The park is long and narrow, with the Shenandoah River and its broad valley to the west, and the rolling hills of the Virginia Piedmont to the east. Skyline Drive is the main park road, generally traversing along the ridgeline of the mountains. It raises to elevations of more than 4,000 feet. It may not have been a park that long, but the land is old. Some of the rocks exposed in the park date back to over 1 billion years in age, making them among the oldest in Virginia. Shenandoah National Park offers 196,000 acres of backcountry and wilderness camping. While in the backcountry, campers must use a leave no trace policy that includes burying excrement and no building campfires. The park was the perfect place for a backpack trip for Julie and Lollie. They had it all planned out. They would leave on May 19th and be done by May 28th. Lollie brought her dog Taj along with them. On May 28th, when they were set to return, Julie's dad, Thomas, was a bit concerned because she didn't call. But sometimes things happen and hiking trips can be delayed, so he wasn't too concerned about it. But by May 31st, having heard nothing, he reported them as missing. Now, the park rangers started their search quickly, like right after the report. And right away, they found their car parked at the Skyline Lodge, and then they quickly found Lollie's dog, Taj. He had no lead on him, but it was unharmed, which honestly always makes me feel a little bit happier when the dog isn't harmed. The dog was right near the campgrounds. The next day, they found the bodies of Lollie and Julie about a half a mile from where their car was. The park had a rule where no one could camp near the trails. It had to be out of sight from the trails. So they were a bit out of the way, and that's why they weren't spotted by other hikers and campers. Julie was found about 40 feet away from the tent, bound and gagged with duct tape. Lollie was found in the tent, also bound and gagged with duct tape. This is kind of rough, so a little bit of a trigger warning here. If you don't want to hear it, just skip. Both of their throats were slit, and they were partially undressed, but they were not sexually assaulted. May 24th was the last date that either of them were seen, and they're not sure how long they'd been dead when they were found. Photos left behind in the camera give a glimpse to the last few days of Julie and Lollie's lives. The women arrived in Shenandoah National Park on May 19, 1996, and launched into the woods of the White Oak Canyon Trail, emerging again a few days later due to rain. And I saw where it said it rained a couple of days. So then they climbed Hawksbill, the highest mountain in Shenandoah, before making camp that night near the Appalachian Trail. This is where their bodies were found. Because this was a national park, the FBI led investigation. And even with working with the Park Service and the state police, there was very little evidence to be found. Something I was reading about their relationship of Lollie and Julie, was that they were publicly outed on the day of their funerals. And this unfortunately blew up in the media and became national news. They said this was in part because the FBI was considering if the case was a hate crime and wanted the public to know that the two women could have been killed for being lesbians. Which I don't really agree with, that they let everybody know that when they weren't ready to share the information with the world yet. But I guess that's the way it goes. Nothing else happened until July 1997. Shenandoah Skyline Drive is a popular place for bikes, and in July 1997, Yvonne Malabasha, a tourist from Canada, was doing just that. Malabasha was forced off the road and off her bike by a man driving a truck. He screamed sexual profanities at her as he stepped from his vehicle in rage, and he tried to force her inside. Malabasha was able to fight him off and took cover behind a tree as the man got back in his truck, and he repeatedly tried to run her over. Eventually, he gave up and left, but the park rangers apprehended him as he was attempting to leave the park. Later, when investigators searched his vehicle, they found hand and leg restraints hidden inside. The attacker was Daryl David Rice. He was in his late 20s and living in Columbia, Maryland, a single guy with no kids. He had no previous criminal record. In 1998, Daryl David Rice pled guilty to attempted abduction of Malabasha. He was sentenced to 135 months in Petersburg, Virginia, federal penitentiary. Interviews after his arrest led prosecutors to believe that Rice may have been involved with Julie and Lollie's murders. The prosecution documents stated, Rice became a possible suspect for a variety of reasons, including the obvious parallels in geographic location, the predatory behavior exhibited, and the exclusive selection of female victims. And Rice was videotaped entering the park at Front Royal 8:05 on May 25th, and again at Rockfish Gap at 4:57 on May 26th. He returned with his friends Carol and Robert Rucker on June 1st. Rice denied that he was in the park on May 25th and 26th, but did admit that he was there on June 1st. In April 10th, 2001, nearly 5 years after their death, Attorney General John Ashcroft announced the indictment of Daryl David Rice in the murder of Julie Williams and Lollie Winans. In a press conference announcing Rice's indictment, prosecutors alleged that Rice had stated on several occasions that he enjoyed assaulting women because they are, in his words, quote, more vulnerable than men. Additionally, prosecutors stated that Rice and the women deserved to die because they were gay. Rice was charged with 4 counts of capital murder, 2 of which alleged he selected his victims because of their sexual orientation. Because of this, Rice was charged with a hate crime. His indictment invoked a federal sentencing and, if convicted, could receive the death penalty. This was the first time there had been a trial for this type of hate crime, but he was never sentenced. There was only circumstantial evidence and they lacked forensic evidence. Then in 2003, a hair found at the crime scene was tested. DNA results indicated that it did not match Rice or the victims. After that, the case fell apart. And in 2004, the charges against Daryl David Rice were dismissed without prejudice, meaning that he could still be charged at a later date. At that point, no one had been convicted of the murders, and Rice was released from prison in 2011. The last reported sighting of Rice was in 2014 when police in Durango, Colorado, had reported him for a crime. Although many thought that it was Rice, others thought that maybe it could be someone who just came across them and realized they were lesbians and just killed them due to homophobia. It was definitely a different time then, and it wasn't accepted as it was today. But it still wasn't like the 50s where it was completely taboo, but there just weren't as many lesbians out and about. So this was one of the motives the FBI were looking into. The FBI also couldn't rule out that it wasn't connected to the Colonial Parkway murders. The Colonial Parkway murders were the serial murders of at least 8 people in the U.S. state of Virginia between 1986 and 1989. The killings were associated with the Colonial Parkway, a 22-mile-long thoroughfare that cuts through the Shenandoah National Historical Park and connects Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown. Long stretches of the road are devoid of any streetlights and are extremely isolated, making it a popular lover's lane location frequented by young adults. In each incident, a young couple sitting in a vehicle was targeted and both were killed. 3 pairs of victims were recovered and another couple remains missing and presumed dead. Several additional homicides have been tentatively linked to the 4 confirmed cases. The causes of death include strangulation, gunshot, and stabbing. There was no evidence of burglary or sexual assault in any of the cases. The killer drove his victims' vehicles away from the murder sites. The linking of the 4 crimes is circumstantial. Shenandoah National Park is just about 140 miles away, so not too far out of the area. And 2 of the Colonial Parkway victims, Kathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski, were lesbians and killed in a way similar to Julie and Lollie, with their throats slashed and they were bound. Also no evidence of sexual assault. The FBI looked at these 2 cases closely. Also, a known serial killer was a suspect, Mark Evans. He killed 3 girls in Fredericksburg in 1996 and 1997, but he died in 2002, and the lead died with him. The FBI did a nationwide manhunt and had 15,000 leads, but none of them led to a suspect. For 20 plus years, it was a cold case, but in 2021, the new FBI Richmond investigative team was assigned to conduct a methodic review of the case. They reassessed hundreds of leads and interviews. They spent countless hours to identify and prioritize evidence from the crime scene to retest and submitted the items to an accredited private lab. Recently, the private lab successfully pulled DNA from several items of evidence, and with assistance from the Virginia State Police, the profile was submitted to the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS. There was a positive match to Walter Leo Jackson Sr., born November 2, 1947. Jackson was a convicted serial rapist, originally from the Cleveland, Ohio area. Of course he was from Ohio. Big eye roll there. Everybody bad's from Ohio. No, I'm from Ohio. I'm just kidding. Even though we had his DNA match, we took additional steps and compared from evidence from Lollie and Julie's murders directly to a buccal swab containing Jackson's DNA. Those results confirmed we had the right man and finally could tell the victims' families we knew who was responsible for this heinous crime, said Stanley Meador, the FBI Richmond special agent in charge. After 28 years, we are now able to say who committed the brutal murders of Lollie Winans and Julie Williams in Shenandoah Park. United States Attorney Christopher R. Kavanaugh said, I want to again extend my condolences to the Winans and Williams families and hope today's announcement provides some small measure of solace. A residential painter by trade, Jackson was said to be an avid hiker who regularly visited Shenandoah National Park. At the time of the murders, we believe he was driving a 1984 chestnut brown AMC Eagle 30, the FBI said. Jackson later drove a 1979 model Ford Econoline 250 van. Jackson was known to use temporary tags and alter license plates and frequently changed vehicles. Unfortunately, Jackson died in Cuyahoga County, Ohio at age 70. He had served at least 4 separate prison terms after being convicted of murder for multiple rapes and assaults. However, agents said their investigation into Jackson is not done. They're asking the public for any information about Jackson's whereabouts during the times he was not incarcerated and connecting with other law enforcement agencies who may have unsolved crimes. It's amazing after all these years they found out who the killer really was. Can you imagine being the family and not knowing all that time? It must have been awful, but finally they have an answer. Like I said, it's not the monsters you have to worry about, it's the humans that are the real monsters. See, that one was a heavy one, a page turner, if it was a novel. I hope you enjoyed it. I know that it was a bit different from the other two, but like I said, I'm going to explore all things dark in Appalachia, and that includes disasters, murders, and anything else you can think of. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you could, please keep sharing my podcast and rate me when you can. And you can contact me on Facebook or email me. You can follow me on Facebook if you go to my page, Poison Appalachia, The Dark Side of Appalachia. I'm on Instagram at instagram.com/poison_Appalachia. I'm on TikTok at tiktok.com/poison_Appalachia. I'm also on Threads at threads.net/poison_Appalachia. My email, if you have any suggestions, comments, or your own experiences, is poisonappalachia@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.